All right. A definition of done is a minimal list of things that have to happen in order to consider work finished, right? It's a set of tasks that the team needs to do for every story to make sure it's done. A typical definition of done, or traditional one, might start with the developer checking in his code and goes through the product owner accepting that the work is done, accepting that it's been done right. Once we add in continuous delivery and DevOps, we have more automation at our disposal, right? We have more automation available. That means we can start doing testing beyond the deploy, after it's configured, while it's set up in place. So the whole point of our continuous delivery pipeline, or our DevOps pipeline, is to decide, do we have a viable candidate for production, right? Build confidence in that. And the way we do that is by testing more and more. Do we have a viable candidate for production all the way through this entire pipeline? So for DevSecOps, what does it mean? Well, first off, I hate the term DevSecOps. It makes it sound like there's a version of DevOps that doesn't care about security, right? Still, it's a good reminder to the team and others that security is going to be a primary focus. Next, what do we mean by security? Well, basically, if the software does what it's supposed to do and it's available to the people that need to use it. Anything that improves quality is going to improve availability and probably improve confidentiality and integrity as well, right? So if quality is important to security, we ought to start at our unit tests, right? They're the basis of our confidence in the developed code. So we can use mutation tests to measure what is the code actually testing, what are our unit tests actually testing. Use static analysis tools to help improve the quality of our code. Higher quality code's easier to be confident in, right? Make sure that you use static analysis tools to look for SQL injection, race conditions, and even just coding style, like tabs versus spaces. You don't have to get in fights about that. That leaves your real code reviews to focus on the subjective stuff, the stuff that the tools can't do. Stuff like, what encryption are we using? Are we doing input-output validation and encoding? How are we handling our errors? Once we know that the code's doing what it was intended to do, we also need to make sure it's doing the right things. Do users have access to data that they shouldn't? Do they have access to features that they don't need, right? User role testing just checks those conditions, positive or negative, right? And while we're doing that user role testing, we can pipe that through a security proxy just to get some security scanning in, looking for cross-site scripting, SQL injection, cross-site request forgeries. Since we're doing DevOps and CD, we have automated deploys. Use them, practice them, make sure they're reliable and repeatable. Gain confidence that your deploys are going to work, and then use that to help you do testing beyond the configuration as deployed. Doing automated builds and deploys means you know what's in your code, what libraries your code is using. Now you have a list that if you find a vulnerability in one of those libraries, you know what apps need to be updated. Then do the same thing with the packages that are deployed on the system. Keep them up to date. Make sure you always have the latest system patch, the security patches. Do your incremental updates rather than having to wait to do one massive upgrade at the end. Traditional ops security still has to be done. We're still going to harden the systems, audit ourselves, make sure that only the pieces that we're using are installed, and make sure everything's protected and monitored. In fact, insufficient logging and monitoring is on the 2017 OWASP Top 10 as one of the items to look for, right? Make sure we know what's going on in the app, on the systems, between the systems. Make sure it's all monitored so we know what's going on. But most of all, you have to assess the risk of every change and accept that risk of every change that you put into the system. Know that what you're doing for this particular story, or what you're doing for every story, is good enough for this story in particular. So what do I think has to go into a definition of done for DevSecOps? Well, make sure we have sufficient unit tests. Keep relying on static analysis and code reviews, but also start looking at vulnerable components and make sure our system packages are up to date. Traditional ops like server hardening and logging and monitoring still have to be there. And we still want to look at what users can and can't do and look for some security scanning. But most of all, assess the risk of every change you put into the system to decide if you're still building a viable candidate for production, right? And remember, no definition of done is ever set in stone, not even in DevSecOps. Make sure you reflect, continuously improve, continuously look at, is this still providing us value? Thank you.
Good job.